Welcome to another edition of Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our first guest today, Carrie Filipetti, previously joined us on our special edition covering Venezuela. She is currently the executive director of the Vandenberg Coalition and previously served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cuba and Venezuela in the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs and Deputy Special Representative for Venezuela at the U.S. Department of State. Carrie Filipetti, welcome back to the program.
So great to be with you guys again. Thanks so much.
So, Carrie, we get show notes the day before, Sam and I. Then I wake up this morning, Cuba, it's trending. It's trending. Cuba has announced they've officially entered negotiations with the United States after decades of tension. What does this mean?
Yeah, there's a few different ways that we can take this. I think obviously President Trump has been putting intense pressure on Cuba immediately after Operation Absolute Resolve in Venezuela. He said that Cuba would likely be next. He essentially said we can do this the easy way or the hard way. So I think right now the question is, what are these negotiations around, and making sure that they're actually around democratic reforms, because of course the Cuban people have been suffering under this communist regime for decades. It has been the cause of significant migration into the United States and elsewhere, and it's a major sort of holding for Russia and China as well. And so if we can actually transition Cuba to a democracy, it would be an unbelievable win for this administration. It's going to be really challenging given how ideological this regime is and how much they're willing to withstand.
So, I woke up, and so I try to find if there's any polling done in Cuba, and I would not view it as very reliable. But most polling I've seen, about 2/3 of Cubans favor political change, with 30 to 35% desiring just a drastic radical change, and about 43% preferring moderate, gradual, partial changes, which seems to be, Trump's not regime change, he's more regime alterations, it seems like. And that seems like that's how he would pursue Cuba. Do you think that's what he'll do if they're negotiating like they're doing in Venezuela? Let's start opening things up. Let's release political prisoners. Let's give people XYZ so they start seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, the concern that I have is that President Trump seems to really like what he calls the Delcy option, right? The idea you take out the guy at the top and then the rest of the regime will follow your commands. But I think, first of all, in Cuba, there is no Delcy option. There's no sort of even theoretical moderate within the regime. And secondarily, I don't think the Delcy option is frankly going to work in the context of Venezuela either.
Right.
Because it is, again, they are going to do everything that they can to keep their grip on power. They'll give a couple things to President Trump. They'll give him some oil here and there, but I don't think they're going to move towards the human rights changes and the democratic changes. And once again, the reason that matters is there's a direct security implication for the United States. So this negotiation is interesting with Cuba because it's not being done with Diaz-Canel. It is being done with the apparatus that actually controls Cuba, which is essentially the Castro family. But again, you are talking about the Cuban people suffering. There's over 1,000 political prisoners in Cuba. We have people who are basically on their deathbeds right now because of hunger strikes in the Cuban prisons. So there is a lot of reform, and this particular regime has been highly resistant to that, thanks to the support that they're getting from Russia and China. And so this is going to be a really tough thing to crack. I think Secretary Rubio is the best position to do it of anybody that we've had in the U.S. government in recent years. But I still think a negotiation is going to be really challenging with a regime that is this ideological.
Carrie, shouldn't one of the conditions that Donald Trump is putting in be that there be at some point for Venezuela, for Cuba, theoretically, potentially, eventually for Iran, it's a timeline for an internationally observed or administered election?
Yes, I think that is essential. The other command that I would make of the Cuban regime, everybody forgets about this, but we had significant amounts of American diplomats that were injured inside Havana Syndrome. We're now hearing that that was likely a weapon that was created by the Russians. I'm not surprised. We know that they have that capability. So we need to be holding the Cuban regime and the Russians accountable for this. There's no way that the Russians deployed that against American diplomats without the regime giving them the okay. So looking into Havana Syndrome, making sure that we're protecting our citizens. If you visit Cuba, your hotel is run by the Cuban military. That means they are spying on you. And in fact, they have actually gotten long-term spies for the Cuban regime by going into people's hotel rooms, reading their diaries, and so on. So this is something that they regularly do to antagonize Americans. So we need to make sure we're protecting Americans in these negotiations, and we need to make sure that we're moving towards internationally observed elections, because again, the whole reason for the instability that is generating President Trump's interest in our hemisphere is the fact that these are authoritarian, undemocratic regimes. And we won't address that if we continue to see those regimes exist, just putting Delcy Rodriguez in power instead of Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, when you mentioned going into the hotel rooms there, I had a flashback to 1987. I got to visit the Soviet Union with my family, and the bathroom at our hotel had this giant blinking light camera in the ceiling.
No, that's exactly right. And I had heard this story, and I don't know how true this is, but they're basically saying, sometimes they would go into different facilities to check for bugs, and they would find that the bugs were the actual infrastructure of the building. They were actually in the actual physical structure.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just added. So the Cuban intelligence services are some of the most sophisticated that there are. They're the ones that were providing support to the Maduro regime. So these are very closely connected regimes. So it is critically important that we get rid of the Cuban regime, that we get rid of the Maduro regime, because that will allow us to focus our energies on things like China, which these two regimes have essentially been proxies for China in our hemisphere for many, many years.
Are those populations, I mean, you're closer certainly than we are. Are they ready to embrace a move towards capitalism? I mean, fundamentally, do we have the sort of zeitgeist there that you're seeing with the population in Iran to have something different happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's start with Venezuela. Absolutely. They had decades of democracy, and they know all of those institutions. They know how to reform these institutions, and they feel that democracy is really a central part of their heritage. Bolivar actually helped liberate many countries and bring democracy to those countries in Latin America. So this is something that is very well known to them, and partially why I've always argued that getting rid of Nicolas Maduro is not going to result in an Iraq-like situation, because democracy is really native there and they know how to do it. They actually organized their own primary elections in 2023. And so we know that they have the ability. Inside Cuba, obviously, they have been without democracy, and it's been many, 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 many years. They don't have a legacy of democracy. It will be a lot harder. But you have seen so many different Cubans that have come to the United States, contributed heavily to the United States, understand the important role of democracy. I have never seen more pro-democracy activists and more inspired democracy activists than among the Cuban people. You remember Secretary Rubio, who is a huge proponent of democracy and virtue. He comes from a Cuban background. Senator Cruz comes from a Cuban background. So these are some of the people that are most connected to democracy. It's going to take a lot of time. This is not going to be easy. I think this is why President Trump is trying to do the negotiation track for now, but certainly we know that both the Cubans and the Venezuelans are capable of it.
Chuck, you do a lot of business in Miami. There's a ton of Cuban.
Oh my gosh, that's
who would jump in and help stabilize it, invest, do all that, right?
Every time I go down and get an Uber, you have a Venezuelan flag and a Cuba flag on the car. I mean, they're excited. I told you when Venezuela happened, all of the Uber drivers were giving me cigars, and I don't smoke, right? So I brought them back for Shay. So, Carrie, explain to her, the one thing people don't understand is I think some people, I think a lot of people in America, because they're civically illiterate, don't understand the chaos Cuba causes in Central and South America. That basically any Marxist-type government, they're behind it, providing security, intelligence, and doctors, which I've read sound like a lot of times they're just hostages being sent there. Explain to our audience what Cuba does, what they've done over the decades promoting Marxist and anti-America regimes in Central and South America.
Well, you said it exactly right. This is really about the exportation of Marxism across the world. They have done a number of things. So they train the security services of some of the adversarial regimes in the hemisphere, to include the Venezuelan regime, Nicaragua, They teach them tactics on how to suppress protesters, which often lead to protester deaths. They help make sure that they are trained in surveillance as well. So there were a lot of Cubans. You may remember in the operation against Nicolas Maduro, there were 32 Cubans that were killed in that operation because they were the ones that were providing the physical security to Nicolas Maduro. They use their doctors, which they call it the Cuban Doctors Program, has allegations that I firmly believe that there is human trafficking involved. They take all of the passports and documents away from these doctors and then force them to spy on the different populations that they are serving. The Cubans who are involved in this are mostly victims. They have no other recourse to get back home. Their stipends and money is held up, not provided to them or their families until they do this reporting. This was a significant concern in the first administration. We tried to call attention to all of these human rights violations and actually stopped funding the Pan American Health Organization. A difficult decision as it was the middle of the pandemic, but they had been involved in promoting the Cuban Doctors Program in the Western Hemisphere, including in Brazil. So they are constantly partnering with our adversaries. They are constantly partnering with anti-American regimes, and they often try to use their diplomacy in the United Nations and elsewhere to try to pull votes away from the United States and more in favor of them. So they are really the center of the Russian and Chinese activities inside the Western Hemisphere. There are significant spy outposts that they have. And so this is a really serious concern for the United States. It's why every administration has been concerned about it and why it actually has been U.S. policy since Helms-Burton was passed that we actually are pushing for some kind of change inside Cuba. That is not true for almost any other country in the world.
We have about 40 seconds left before we have to start breaking for the next segment with you. Quickly, we talked about it earlier. Remind our audience what happened with the Havana syndrome.
Yeah, so this was an instance where we had diplomats in Cuba who were reporting these odd sensations, pressure waves, debilitating illness, some of which continues to today, nearly a decade later. There was no clarity on what had caused these symptoms. They happened first in Havana, then there were reported incidents against U.S. diplomats around the world. The U.S. government has never been clear on what caused it. It seems to me, and I've always believed, that it was the Russian regime. We know they have the capability. And there's since been reporting that we may have actually deployed a similar weapon that we purchased from the Russians in our operation in Venezuela.
All right.
Okay. That is so U.S. To purchase the weapon afterwards. Okay. I'm almost not even sure where to go with that. Carrie Filipetti will be right back with more here in just a moment. Breaking Battlegrounds coming right back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. We're continuing on with our guest, Carrie Filipetti, who previously joined us talking about Venezuela. She is the executive director of the Vandenberg Coalition and former deputy assistant secretary for Cuba and Venezuela. But before we continue on with her,
we got to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Folks, did you know there's $300 billion in private student loan debt in the United States, and that $45 billion of that is distressed, which means basically default? Our clients, our friends, refinance distressed, defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. They want to help you get your credit back in order. Refi is not a debt settlement company, and they work with each borrower individually, tailoring each loan to each borrower's specific situation. You will not be calling a faceless call center. Refi can reduce your monthly payment and guarantees interest rates under 6%. Most of you are paying double digit if you're in default. So ensuring affordability and financial relief. Refi does not care what your credit score is. So get your financial house in order. Contact Refi at 877-400-9989. Again, that's 877-400-9989. Tell them Chuck and Sam sent you. We're back with Carrie. Carrie, so here's a question I have. It seems to me our media is really rooting against the United States and Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. It's a real odd thing. And I saw a poll yesterday where they put Trump's name attached to Iran, where are you for the strikes or against? And by double digits, they were opposed. Then when you took Trump's name out of the question, it was even. It was literally even public support for it. So today, Bloomberg has an article, and it starts with the U.S. president's war on Iran drags on. The problem with that line is on February 28th, when we started this, Trump said this would take 4 to 5 weeks, which means he has to April 4th and 5th. He clearly laid out there's no dragging on. And everything I understand, if you truly read it, is they are having an amazing military success. Tell me what I'm missing on this.
No, I mean, I think it's the mainstream media that's missing something. I mean, this is really, in my view, Trump derangement syndrome. I saw reporting on different polls that were coming out where Trump voters were very clearly, wildly in favor of these operations, and the headlines would say things like, "Trump has no support for his operation," because they were basing it off what the Democrat line item was. We at Vandenberg conducted a poll. It showed that 85% of Trump voters are wildly in favor of this operation. 90% of them believe that it's made America safer. And we know that it has, because we are seeing that the missile strikes, ballistic missile strikes, are down 90%. Drone strikes are down 83%. The Navy essentially doesn't exist in Iran anymore. And so, yes, this is going to continue, and we have to see, to really label this a success, we have to see what ends up in the end. But for now, this has been going very well, very much according to, I think, the administration's plan. But as you say, when people say President Trump, they just assume it must be something bad. But I actually think this is a really amazing success for the United States so far. And something that people aren't talking about is it really displays both American capability militarily as well as the American will. And those were both things that we had lost track of after the fall of Kabul being the signal of our military. And now we have Midnight Hammer, we have Absolute Resolve, we have Epic Fury. People now know that the United States military is not something to be trifled with. That has an amazing advantage for us, not just in Iran, but also with respect to our other adversaries like Russia and China.
Carrie, the Democrats in the U.S., along with many Republicans, are drawing a hard line in the sand on troops on the ground.
Yeah.
I would posit that there's maybe a different scenario for troops on the ground now, here and now, than we think of. It doesn't necessarily need to be thousands and thousands of troops in heavy armored columns. This might be a situation where it's a number of special forces operations to target specific individuals that you can't get, or institutions.
Or uranium.
Or uranium or something like that. Is that something that you see as likely a possibility to actually achieve, some sort of regime change or turnover there?
Well, obviously, President Trump didn't rule it out. I think that is the most likely option if we're talking about any troops on the ground. Remember, in Absolute Resolve in Venezuela, we had special forces go in. It was a few hours long operation. They were able to apprehend Maduro. Nobody expected that that's the way that we were going to conduct that operation. They were thinking it was going to be airstrikes or an invasion force. So President Trump does signal that he likes the judicious use of air power, as well as using some special forces, because we are so highly capable. I wouldn't be surprised if we did see some kind of commando force go in to remove the highly enriched uranium. So as you know, there's about 400 kilograms estimated highly enriched uranium. That's enough if they enrich it to 90% to get to 10 nuclear bombs. So it's probably buried under the rubble after our attack at Midnight Hammer. And so it would make sense for us to send in troops to do that. I don't think President Trump is going to push for ground troops as in an invasion. To your point, I think there's a lot of Democrats that would be frustrated by that. I think there's a lot of Republicans that would be concerned about that as well. So there are definitely different ways that we can do this without actually going to sort of a conventional war.
Last question. We have just about 3 minutes left. Turning back to Latin America. Obviously, we've seen enormous changes in Panama and with the U.S. relationship at Panama, the Panama Canal, with what's happening in Venezuela and Cuba. If the U.S. were to stabilize those countries as allies, democratic allies of the United States, what does that mean for the next 20 years of the future in this hemisphere?
It's such a good question because everybody focuses on what those countries look like now, and they
Right.
forget that at one point, some of these countries, Venezuela in particular, was the wealthiest country in Latin America. It was the most highly educated country in Latin America. It was the country that brought democracy to the rest of the hemisphere. And so when you think about what the options are, first and foremost, you're kicking our adversaries out of our hemisphere, which is exactly what the Don Roe Doctrine is all about, getting rid of Russia, China, and Iran. You can do that by making sure we have democracy in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. More importantly, the amount of economic opportunities, untapped oil reserves and gold reserves inside Venezuela, of course, the opportunities in tourism, if you remove the government control of that sector in Cuba, would be an enormous boon to the United States. And importantly, we would not see the illicit immigration that we're seeing coming, mostly inspired by these authoritarian regimes. So I think that the real beauty of the quote Don Roe Doctrine is if we can see those democratic transitions, because it will really benefit the security of the United States. We won't have to worry about the security here. We can focus on China. We can make sure that they're not trying to attack our critical infrastructure, make sure that they're not trying to attack Taiwan. It would be an incredibly important step for us to be able to focus on sort of America and American power without being distracted by some of the things at our border.
Last question, 30 seconds left here. Would that affect the situation in Mexico for Claudia Sheinbaum in dealing with the cartels and perhaps bringing that situation under control as well?
I certainly hope that President Sheinbaum understands that the strikes on Venezuelan gun boats or drug boats was as much a signal to her as it was to Nicolas Maduro. She needs to do a lot more in security cooperation. They're starting to do it a little bit, but what we really need to do is understand that it is people at the state and federal level in the Mexican government that are connected to these narco terrorists. We should go after the cartel heads, absolutely. But until we cut out that layer of actual institutional governmental support, we're going to continue to have this problem. So I hope that's the president's next objective.
Carrie Filipetti, thank you so much for joining us. You're amazing. We love having you on this program. Folks, follow the Vandenberg Coalition at vandenbergcoalition.org. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back in one moment. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest today, Stacy Liberatore. She is the U.S. Science and Technology Editor at the Daily Mail, covering a wide range of topics including space, climate change, AI, and archaeological discoveries. She has amazing stories out. If you're not following the Daily Mail and you're not getting this, you need to be. As we've said before, they're doing amazing, amazing work. Stacy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I think Stacy's the Indiana Jones of journalism.
The bio certainly goes there.
All
That
right.
is honestly the best compliment because when I was little, I wanted to be Indiana
Well,
Jones, so I will take that.
Let's put it on
You
your
got there.
profile. Let's put it on your profile. We'll allow you to trademark it. All right. So you cover a wide range of things, but you did a story which brought us to you, and we hope you'll be a longtime guest, about declassified CIA files revealing a blueprint to manipulate American minds through cover drugging with vaccines. So basically, the CIA used vaccine drugs to manipulate American minds. Tell us the story.
So this file, it's so crazy because we have to go back. During the Cold War, the CIA, I like to call it the Wild Wild West. It was just, a group of people in a room with federal funding out the wazoo. So they were just testing all kinds of crazy experiments because it was the Cold War and everybody was scared. So they were trying to get the upper hand.
And those were the Wild Bill Donovan days, right? When he was leading the org?
I'm not quite sure who was leading it at the time, but it started in I think early 1950s and ran into the 1970s, all these experiments and all these programs. But this one in particular was probably one of the first one. It was called the Project Artichoke, and this was the precursor to the big one, the MK Ultra. So this one started, they were just seeing how they could manipulate people's minds, if they could use certain chemicals and certain drugs in vaccines, in food, spiking people's beer and things like that. So, I mean, I see why people, were so amazed by this story because a lot of people feel that this is currently happening now. But, yeah, so they would disguise it in medical treatments and vaccines and injections. And it's unclear if they've ever, deployed these out
So,
in the public.
but in testing, did they have success with this? Or, I mean, like, is there any, how far did they get in that process, I guess, is my question.
I mean, the documents, they actually do not say how far they got in these. Well, in a lot of these documents, they destroyed around, I would say, 1973. So this could have just been like the outline of like, this is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to use. And then if they did follow up, experiments afterwards, they might have destroyed those documents. Because in 1973, there was a huge hearing where, a lot of the CIA members were brought into court and things like that. So.
I mean, this stuff, it makes you think, like, Men Who Stare at Goats should be a farce, and yet it probably wasn't. How broad were these type of experiments, or how much more do you think is out there attached to this?
I mean, there's so many. I've been covering this for a very long time. There's so many experiments. There's mind control experiments where they use, sounds and imagery and things like that. I think, I think it's just endless. And like I said, they destroyed who knows how many.
Why?
And
Why?
who knows
Why? Why? I mean, people are going to ask the question, why? What's the purpose
Yeah.
of them doing this?
I mean, obviously, I don't know, but I feel like we can all imagine why you would destroy a bunch of documents before a court hearing.
Wait, oh, that, yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
for sure. But why? But why this? Why
Mind
this mind
manipulation.
manipulation? This control? What do you feel the purpose was?
I think it was, like I said, it was during the Cold War, so they were trying to see if they could test this on the Soviets, if this would be used during the Soviets against them and things like that. I mean, there was this Operation Sea Spray that happened, and they were spraying chemicals over California to see how it, the state would react if there was a biochemical attack during that time. I mean, they were doing stuff like this all the time.
This is wild.
I mean,
wild stuff.
The problem right now, and Stacy, you cover, again, folks, we're here with Stacy from the U.S. Science and Technology editor from the Daily Mail. She's our Indiana Jones of journalism. This is what all these people who we always say have aluminum foil around their head are just nuts. And the government, the last 5 years, just keeps proving these supposed nuts correct. Am I wrong on this?
No, it's so funny because I've been saying this all year, even this year alone. Like every conspiracy theory seems to have a little truth behind it at this point. I mean, even in the past 3 months, we've seen so many different things happen, especially, with the Epstein files and things like that. Things that people would discuss years ago that you'd look at them and be like, you're crazy, are actually real. And it's disturbing.
Stacy, we're going to be going to break here for just a moment. We're going to be coming right back with more from you. We have another couple of articles that we definitely want to get to. But yeah, I never thought tinfoil hats would end up being an effective barrier against nuttiness.
I know. Yeah, no kidding.
Breaking Battlegrounds coming right back. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your hosts Chuck Warren and Sam Stone. Continuing on here in just a moment with Stacy Liberatore. She is the U.S. Science and Technology editor at the Daily Mail. You can follow her on X at Stacy Liberatore. But first,
folks, do you or someone you know, are they in default on a private student loan? If they are, Sam and I highly recommend they call Y-Refi at 877-400-9989. They can provide you with a custom loan payment that's based on your ability to pay, not what their wish is, what your ability is to pay. Y-Refi is not a debt settlement company, and they work with each borrower individually, tailoring your loan to your specific situation. You will not be calling a faceless call center, and they do not care what your credit score is. Again, they will reduce your monthly payment and guarantee an interest rate under 6%, ensuring that you have affordability and financial relief in your life. So, if you or someone you know is in default of a private student loan, and there's $45 billion worth of it out there in the United States, Call Y-REFI at 877-400-9989. Again, 877-400-9989. And tell them Chuck and Sam sent you.
Chuck's 6% is pretty amazing in a world where you can't get a car loan at that number.
Can't get a mortgage yet, probably.
No.
6.11 now. All right, we're back. We're back with Stacy. How are you, Stacy?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How are you guys?
Good, good, good.
So you had another piece out, outrage over potentially cancer-causing drug hidden by CIA for years, and then a follow-up where Johns Hopkins has actually been using or developing that drug. Tell us about this story, because all of this seems to tie together a little bit with the previous conversation, and the deeper someone like you digs, the wilder it gets.
Yeah, this one is interesting because the CIA report was basically summarizing research that they got from the Soviets during, I think it was like, it was a 1951 study. It was declassified in 2014. And it just summarizes this Soviet scientific paper where they found similarities between parasitic worms and cancerous tumors, you know, how they thrive, what they survive on. It seems to be pretty similar. So these Soviets decided, like, okay, well, if that's the case, we have anti-parasitic drugs. So let's try it out. And they tested it on mice with tumor tissues.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that they were able to reduce the tumor tissues.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Why would they hide this?
yeah.
I mean, we don't know. It's mind-blowing to me. I mean, it makes no sense why you would hide something like this.
Well, I mean, the CIA has a publicly disclosed employees of 22,000 people. Then who knows how many contractors? Let's add another 10, 20,000 to that,
At least,
right?
yeah.
At least, okay? And the thing about these stories which cause me concern is the CIA there is really there to protect the United States, right? And sometimes, a lot of times, that work is ugly. But when I hear things like this, that they would go and suppress a cancer-curing drug, I can't follow the logic on it. Is that a question you ask yourself when you come across these files? Like, why would they do this when they're supposed to be defending America and its people?
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I've been covering this for a long time, and I have spoken with current CIA members, and they made a really good point that this was a time that was completely different from the CIA now. So, like I call it, it was the wild, wild west. There was no oversight over the CIA at all. Nobody was monitoring them. And then they had all this money, so they were just going buck wild with whatever they could think of. So the CIA now is completely different from the CIA during the Cold War.
So now the turn to this story, though, is that your follow-up piece, that Johns Hopkins actually started researching this and experimenting it. What did you learn there?
That they filed a patent in, I believe it was 2021, for another anti-parasite worm drug, after they also found that the parasites and cancerous cells act similarly. And they actually tested on animals as well, found it could also be a great treatment for brain tumors, which we all know is just one of the most deadliest forms of cancer out there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a death sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Is part of the reason this isn't more widely known, for instance, that is because of the whole thing around ivermectin and COVID? Like, is there sort of an attitude within, certain medical circles not to want to point to this type of drug as being successful at such a wide range of things?
I have two theories. So my one is, I'm going to be more conservative about it, is the fact maybe doctors don't want people, honestly, I can't imagine what it's like to have cancer, and you're probably going to want to try anything and everything.
Correct.
And
right.
Doctors probably don't want people who do have cancer going straight to anti-parasitic worm drugs
Sure.
for their treatment. So maybe that's the reason why, because I know Johns Hopkins, in their 2021 patent, they just said that they were soon starting human trials. So they're probably stopping it there. But then, after I did the cancer CIA file, I saw a lot of people making comments about, big pharma and things like that. So that's my devil's advocate there.
Certainly, that amount of money in any system could change outcomes, right? Especially when you're talking about those are the institutions that fund the research along with the government at many of our medical colleges and universities.
Well, I mean, Stacy, I feel like your reporting could almost, if I was creating a file, be termed, "This is why people hate government."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is just insanity. Let's hop to something here that's. I'll ask this question. After you've read these files, you wrote a story about a hacked NASA system, and they found the truth about UFOs. When you started the story, did you believe in UFOs, and do you believe in them now?
Such a hard question because I honestly I don't believe in UFOs, and I know that's terrible. I
No, it's not
want to.
terrible. It's not terrible.
No, it's actually kind of great.
It's
Yeah.
gonna ruin my street.
Yeah,
It's gonna ruin my street cred.
listen.
Yeah.
We,
No.
Look, the last thing we need is a UFO landing today, right? We just need a
I
little
know,
calm
right?
for a while.
Oh
but
my
anyway,
gosh! At this point, send them in. I mean, but I mean, I want to believe, but I'm like, I have to see it. But I don't discredit anyone's story. I'll tell you that. You know what I mean? If somebody says that they saw this and this happened and they provide me with enough, evidence and details like that NASA story one, I mean, the poor guy hacked into, well, not poor guy, he hacked into this, the systems.
Right.
And he was, facing federal jail. So he obviously saw something to be under, almost threatened with extradition and things like that. So, I
Wow.
mean, again, there's truth behind everything at this point,
What
right?
do you think, if it's not a UFO and what you've read on these files, and I'm sure you've done more research on it based on your story, what do you think it could be?
I mean,
Is it?
That leads me-
I don't put anything past the government now. I mean,
Yeah.
you've proven that, right? So is it some
because
special?
we had the Jersey. Remember the Jersey drones?
Yep.
That fiasco.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
We all thought it could be UFOs. It could be this. I mean,
And it was
Is there-
DOD, right?
Yeah.
it was the FAA. The
FAA.
FAA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's just I can't even tell you. Like, so when he hacked the server, he said that he saw a UFO in one of the pictures over the planet, and it was like a cylinder-shaped object. I mean, nothing other than an alien craft can explain what he saw. That's all I have to say.
That's why. I mean, look, I've heard from pilots. Seen
Mhm.
things out there from pilots who have sworn to these type of encounters, and look, most airline pilots are military trained.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And the last thing they want to do is come out and say that they saw this stuff and be,
Right.
the laughing stock of the group or anything like that and put their careers on the line. So
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to look
Mhm.
like a fool.
So
Yeah.
without making any of us look like fools, Stacy, because you're the science and technology editor, you know a lot more about this stuff than we do. You're covering AI in a large range of topics, including space. What have you seen? It seems like the U.S. in Venezuela and Iran right now is deploying technologies the world hasn't seen before and that aren't fully admitted. What are you seeing out there that surprised you or that you're interested in learning more about?
I mean, given what's currently happening, it's not really like a surprise of the technology. It's a surprise of how it's being used, of how this war in with Iran is. I mean, drones. We're using drones. We're not having human soldiers on the battlefield. And I remember a few years ago, maybe like 10 years ago, listening to a podcast, and some guy was on there and he was like predicting, he's like, future wars will not be fought with human soldiers. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, like, okay, that sounds like a sci-fi movie, but we're living in it.
We
And
are.
it's wild.
I guess the other thing I've been seeing, and I'd love your opinion on this, and Chuck, you as well. Donald Trump took a lot of flack for creating the Space Force as an independent
Oh, he was
branch.
mocked. He was mocked like Reagan was for Star Wars.
Right. But I at least what I've seen reading between the lines in these two conflicts, Space Force is playing an unbelievably central role to this thing and engaging with technologies that our adversaries aren't prepared to counter. Is that an accurate take, Stacy?
Oh yeah. I mean, it is funny because he was totally mocked. They were like Space Force. I mean, it was ridiculous at the time, but they're creating missiles that can like reach outside of our atmosphere now to hit other targets on Earth. I mean, that's incredible. And once, the space race, I mean, we're going to have to see who can get to Mars first, put a moon colony up first. So the wars will end up being in space at some point.
How critical is it then? Like, how much of a risk would it be to the United States and our allies if China or Russia were to get the upper hand in that geopolitical or geospatial conflict?
I mean, it's interesting because we do share the International Space Station with Russia, which is, I mean, it's kind of funny because we can't get along on the ground, but we can get along in space. So,
That's a good point.
But I mean, what could happen is if Russia and China do control space, they control who goes in and out of space, and then that ends all our means to get out there.
As we have got a couple minutes left with you here, Stacy, and you report on technology and science. Putting aside AI, what is a technology out there that you've seen, that you've done research on, that you feel has the ability to really make people's lives better?
Man, that's a good question, huh?
I mean, you see it. So, I mean, we have all these advancements. What is something you're seeing? I mean, it could even be a medical research, and that may be AI is going to make medical research be able to diagnose things quicker. I mean, I don't know what that is, but this is your field. What is something you've come across there, and when you've come across it and dug into it a little bit, said, this can really be a lifesaver, a change maker for people?
I think, these brain chips that they're developing.
Oh,
that
yeah.
are that are helping people with who are paralyzed, who have never been able to even, write on a computer, be able to order things on a computer, play games, they can spell words out again and communicate and feel more alive in the world. I feel like that is just incredible.
It's astounding. And that is not getting nearly enough coverage.
No, it's not. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's only been out for what,
Yeah,
decade most?
Yeah. How
Mm.
I think, Chuck, you hit on something. We have just a minute left here, but I think someone made a comment the other day. Physics hasn't advanced really since Einstein in that era.
It's true.
And AI offers the potential to really begin a next level advancement in physics, right? So this could fundamentally change everything. Should people be embracing an AI future now, or should we be very carefully trying to rein it in?
I am personally not scared of AI. I just,
Love it.
I just don't
Love
see.
it. No, yeah.
Especially in like, okay.
No, that's
We
the
agree.
answer we want on this show
We
too,
agree.
because we're optimists for the future here.
Yeah, I mean, all the applications we're using it for currently, I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them are just, improving workflow and things like that. Are people losing their jobs? They sadly are. But I feel like that's happened with every in type of industrial revolution type of thing. The only thing that bothers me is when they put AI in drones or tanks, and then these AIs can choose targets or things like that. That is the one thing we do need to rein in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Stacy Liberatore. Love having you on the program. Folks, follow her on X at Stacy Liberatore, or obviously at the Daily Mail. Breaking Battlegrounds back on the air next week. Stacy?
Yes.
That was Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our final guest up today, Gary Gygi, President and CEO of Gygi Capital. Find Gary on X at GaryGygi.com or GygiCapital.com. That's GYGI Capital.com. Gary, glad to have you back.
Thanks. Glad to be here, guys.
So, lot of shocks and kind of, people are nervous right now. The economy's all over the place. Is the oil shock right now going to last? Or in your opinion, obviously it's hard to predict geopolitical events, and how damaging is it likely to be to the U.S. economy?
Love the question. I'm of the opinion this doesn't feel like a normal war to me, which tells me that the price of oil and by extension the price of gasoline is probably a temporary increase rather than a prolonged higher prices. So definitely don't have a crystal ball, but it just feels like that to me. Therefore, if that's the case, if I'm right, then as soon as, and I think this really hinges, you guys, on the Strait of Hormuz. And right now it is for the most part closed, which means that ships are not getting through and delivering oil, natural gas to wherever they need to go to. And that's the problem. And the reason they're not getting through is that Lloyd's of London insurance companies are raising the price of insurance so high that it makes little sense for ships to try and get through. President has said that the military may escort them through. If that happens, I think the price of oil, therefore the price of gasoline, very quickly drops. Very quickly.
By the way, should the United States start providing a true long-term alternative to Lloyd's of London? I mean, Lloyd's of London, I mean, they're as a big of a hiccup or speed bump.
I think we have to decouple in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's possible, Gary?
Are you talking about the United States government, or are you just talking about a U.S. insurance company?
A U.S. institution. It may need to be government. I think Trump had talked about, I think, the maritime, whatever. There's some trust that he was planning on using to provide at least temporary insurance. But if you can make it profitable, is this something that they should partner with some U.S. institutions to develop a long-term replacement for Lloyd's?
If you're talking about U.S. institutions, absolutely, sure, why not? If you're talking about the U.S. government, the libertarian in me, guys, comes out and says, no, I don't want government playing in the private sector. Therefore, I wouldn't like that. Now, if we're talking about temporary, I guess, endeavors in order to free this up, that's fine. But in terms of long-term getting into the private sector, no, I don't like that.
Switching topics here a little bit, I think a lot of people were surprised at the February jobs report coming in with relatively high losses, 92,000 jobs. Called a Wall Street Journal said a widespread and unexpected downturn. Was it unexpected? It was widespread, I guess, but was it really unexpected?
From my opinion, no, it was not. So if we go back to the January report, came out much better than expected. And I said publicly there on air, there could be revisions to the January report in February. So 1 month does not a trend make. And so February, again, not necessarily a trend. So from my opinion, it was not as big of a surprise that it was a weak report. It was a surprise to me about how weak it was. It truly was. And so this is written about a lot in the Wall Street Journal and various financial journals, that there's a no hire, no fire phenomenon going on in corporate America right now, which means corporate America is not hiring very much, but they're also not firing very much, because they know that if you fire someone, at some point you're going to have to hire positions back, and it's timely, it's costly in order to bring people on. So they're very loath to lay a lot of people off, but they're not hiring either. And the federal employment workforce has been reduced. So that's what's causing the weakness in the market, is that all it takes is a little bit of moving the dial. And I think what moved the dial in February, you guys, is that Kaiser Permanente in California had a strike. 31,000 employees were either on furlough or out of a job because of the strike. I think that's what hurt it the most and was most unexpected.
Interesting. All right, Gary, before we let you go, tell people how they can get in touch with you and work with you to secure their financial future.
Great. Thanks for asking that. So they can reach me through the website, which is gigicapital.com, GYGI, and then CAPITAL.com. They can also call us at the 801-787-0342. That's 801-787-0342. Always a pleasure to be on the podcast with you guys.
Gary, we love having you. And folks, if you're not, look, if you don't have a financial advisor out there, you need to give Gary a call right now, because this is going to be a difference maker for you and your family if you take that opportunity to work with a real professional like Gary and his team. So definitely
Thanks,
give
man.
him a ring there. Absolutely, Gary. Love having you, and we look forward to having you back here very soon.
Have a good weekend. Thanks very much.
You too. All right, welcome back. Our next guest up, someone we love having on this program, our regular guest, John Levine, reporter at the Washington Free Beacon, covers media, politics, and investigative stories. Follow him on X at Levine Jonathan. John Levine, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, welcome back to the program.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Always a pleasure.
So, my friend, we were talking about this earlier today. Have you ever seen a time where the mainstream media seemed to be truly rooting for America's defeat in Iran, Venezuela, Cuba? Have you seen them do this before with other conflicts?
I mean, it's funny. I remember, the media, it's no is the short answer to this question. Although, I remember they were cheerleaders in Iraq, obviously very famously for a long time before we sort of reevaluated that conflict. And I think a big part of it now, though, is just Trump. And anything Trump touches, they have to be against. And the famous joke is that if Trump cured cancer, CNN would run stories about unemployed oncologists. And that's sort of the media environment we're in right now. But it does put them in the awkward position of sort of rooting for the Ayatollah and rooting for people like Maduro, which is obviously a bad place to be in. And I think, it's been 2 weeks. It's been 10 days. I think the president said initially this was a 6 to 8 week thing. I don't think anybody wants another Iraq, but it's been sold as a limited engagement, and I think we should at least give him the space to do that.
Well, he literally came out on February 28th when we started this and said this would be 4 to 5 weeks.
4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, so now you have like Bloomberg this morning saying that this is dragging on. It's not dragging on. Dragging on if it comes 6, 7 weeks. That's not dragging on.
Well, dragging on might be 6, 7 months.
Yeah, he clearly said 4 to 5 weeks, and it's just appalling. I think Eric Erickson in his newsletter this week showed 2 polls. Do you approve or disapprove the Iran strikes? When they mentioned Trump, it was like double digits disapproved. When they take Trump's name out of it, it was even Steven. It's incredible how the man has just broken minds.
You got to take people at their word. I remember 2 weeks to stop the spread.
Right.
And I said, okay. I didn't quite believe it, but I said, all right, I'll go along with this. Let's give him a chance. 2 weeks. Then it became 2 years. So I'm hoping I'm going to give the president the grace of the 5 to 6 weeks he said at the outset. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if we're here having this conversation in 6 months, I might have a different answer for you.
Well, 6 months. If this conversation happens in 6 months, they have major electoral losses in the House.
Yeah,
that's my guess. Because it's economic, right? It's the price of oil and all these other factors to it. 100%. All right. So, Democrats on the 20th day of keeping DHS closed, right? And the press is not harping on them all. Could you imagine? Look, you're an editor. What would be your headline if Obama was doing a war and a Republican Congress kept DHS shut? What would be the headlines?
Republicans endanger Americans, Republicans destroy our country. Republicans pounce. They love that one.
Yes.
They're always pouncing like a cat on things. No, it's crazy because we're not only are we at war, you remember why DHS was created. It was a 9/11 related creation. So we have the supreme leaders of Iran or whoever he is, the cardboard cutout, have declared jihad or fatwa against the United States. They've enjoined their followers to kill infidels. People don't know this. Ayatollah Khamenei was a religious leader of a branch of Shia Islam with hundreds of millions of adherents. Many tens or even hundreds of thousands of whom live in the United States. He was like a religious leader and he chanted death to America for 40 years. And the United States just killed him. So we have a lot of people in our country who might be very, very upset and very, very angry. And the new religious leaders are saying, take revenge on America.
Right.
We don't have a functioning DHS anymore.
We've already seen a couple of Islamist attacks, one that failed in New York and a couple of others that caused some violence and death. Are you surprised there hasn't actually been more of that so far? I'm actually kind of surprised that the response has been as muted as it is.
We have been incredibly lucky. And don't forget the guy in Austin, Texas, property of Allah, that killed 2 people.
Yep.
So people are already dead in our country. We also had the Old Dominion attack yesterday, which, by the way, ROTC students killed that terrorist with their bare hands. You can read the reporting.
Which is amazing.
They killed him with he was not shot. So, and those are all tragedies. We've been lucky in the sense that we haven't had like double-digit tragedies. We haven't had a truck bomb outside of an embassy. A certain segment of your audience is probably old enough to remember things like Beirut embassy bombing or Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. And you can go to CVS and buy everything you need to make those bombs. And so the supply is not an issue. It's just, do we have sleeper cells in this country? And we definitely do. And it's just a question of means and access. And I hope it doesn't take a tragedy for people to wake up.
Let me ask you this. You wrote a great piece on the former illegal immigrant aide to AOC who self-deported to Colombia. Tell our audience about this story.
That was an old one. I wrote that like several months ago.
Right, but tell us people about it because it's just part of the AOC. What's happened since then? Has this person commented further? Has she commented? Has she been put under scrutiny? What's happened with it? What's the follow-up into it?
I think she's still in Colombia. I don't know. I don't have an update for you on that one.
All right. Mamdani, what's he doing out there? I mean, he has dinner with this anti-Semitic radical. What's the story there?
It's funny. There's an expression that I'm very fond of. And you maybe heard it before. It's called if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's a duck.
Right.
And I feel like with Mamdani, every time you look, it's, he's hired somebody that said, death to Israel. His wife worked with a woman that called Jews cockroaches. Every time you look around, he has some close associate or close friend that has publicly called for violence against Jewish people. And then you see something like the synagogue attack just recently in Michigan, and he'll do a nice statement, but it's kind of a two-step where on the one hand, he pals around with these open terrorists, really violent extremist people, and why they're walking free in our country remains a mystery to me. And then when something bad happens, he says, whoa, who could have seen this coming? This is a tragedy. And I don't think anyone believes it. I don't think anyone wants his thoughts and prayers or apologies. I think they just want him to, stop promoting the violence and extremism that's leading to this.
I think the thing that surprised me most about Mamdani, who, pardon me, I can't pronounce his name because I spend all my time calling him the Mommy Commie. But he's not apparently moderating at all or becoming more realistic in office. And for mayors, you see a lot of ideological mayors get elected, but then they get in and reality slaps them in the jaw and they start backing up. This guy is not backing down from any of his nuttiness, is he?
Well, here's the thing about reality. It will still slap you in the jaw. And he might not be backing down today, but you might have seen New York City's credit rating has been one of the major agencies. It might have been Fitch. I'm not sure which one. Downgraded New York City's credit. Another one put a warning that it could go because he's talking about raiding reserve funding, for emergencies to foot the bill for a lot of the social spending. He came out with an idea today or yesterday, I saw it, where he wants to lower the threshold for the death tax. So that'll go down from $7 million to hit people at $750,000. And it will go to 50%. A 50% death tax. You work your whole life and you want to give to your children, and the government takes half of it. Criminal. And by the way, it's not like you're going to end up with like some Singapore type municipal paradise.
Right.
It's all going to go into the social worker army that's going to do nothing, or a bunch of bloated 311 operators that can't even speak English.
Well,
that's what it's going to pay for.
The credit rating's a big deal.
You'll get nothing. You'll get no services. Nothing will improve. You'll just have less money.
Yeah, and the credit rating's a big deal, right? New York borrows a huge amount of money, so if their credit rating goes down, their costs go way up. That's another budget crisis he's creating coming down the pike.
If you want to borrow money, a city's credit is a lot like credit for you or me. If you have bad credit, the interest you're going to pay on borrowing money is going to be a lot higher. Yep. So when you're in the business of borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars potentially for capital projects, and you have to pay, there's a huge difference between paying, say, 1% interest or 8% interest on that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a huge deal if the credit rating goes down. And I don't see, this is where reality sets in. Something's going to have to give, because he has to balance the books somehow. Like he can't, like the federal government can just deficit spend. We have I don't even want to think about the federal debt. But cities and states need to sort of balance their budgets. They can't just spend into the void forever and ever. And so he will have to, something will have to budge. He'll either have to cut back on social spending or a massive tax hike of some sort. But he's going to have to work with different city partners, like either the city council or the governor's office, none of whom have any interest in doing that. So something's got to give. I don't know what it'll be. Or the city could shut down. That's what a city council member told me recently. There could be like a city shutdown. That's
incredible. Talking about cities, how long have you been in D.C. now, or the D.C. area now?
I am just on a year in D.C.
Okay.
It's so boring. It's very clean. I'm in Arlington. Arlington's very clean. Very nice.
Does the staff you work with and people associated with, do they notice a difference in safety in the city after a year?
Oh, I'm still very, very close to everyone in New York City, and people have told me, even in the 3 months Mamdani has been mayor, you have streets and you have neighborhoods that just feel less safe. You got someone that's been walking down the same street to go home every day for 30 years, and they've seen the street get safer or less safe with different mayors, and it's many, many areas are in a downward trajectory. And I don't know what the official crime numbers say, but frankly, I'll be honest, you can't really trust a lot of the numbers coming out of the NYPD because they're politicized now. And that's not, I'm not casting aspersions on the cops.
Sure.
They get orders from the civilian leaders.
Correct.
Mayor Adams, this happened under Mayor Adams too, where Mayor Adams, and certainly with Mamdani, they're going to be under pressure. We need to show fewer assaults, fewer carjacking, so they just, they kind of sweat the smaller stuff. They just let it go. They don't report stuff. I know of cases in the last administration where crimes were not recorded. They just, oh yeah, miss, we'll file a report, then right in the garbage. So that happens, especially for lower level offenses. And then they can report a lower number for overall crimes for any given category.
How about D.C.? You're out there now. Trump did the National Guard. Do people in D.C. area feel safer in actual D.C. now? Yeah,
D.C. is great. I walk around and I'm fine. And really, the National Guard is very diminished now. I barely even see them anymore. Every now and then, but D.C. it's a well-run shop, and there is a Democrat mayor in D.C. who's reasonable and has worked with Trump on public safety, and the result's been very, very good. And you will have a certain segment of people on CNN talking about how it's like martial law down here when it's anything but. And it's just nice. It's just civilized. You should be able to go outside at night and go for like a run around the capital of our country and not have to look over your shoulder the whole time.
Agree. Final comment here with your time. So Trump seems to be having regime alterations in Venezuela. It looks like Cuba announced today their negotiations with the United States. In your view, how important is it that we have these regime changes or alterations in Cuba and Venezuela, and what does that mean for America's national security?
Well, Venezuela is major because obviously they have the largest untapped oil reserves in the world. And now, not only is that oil no longer going to communist Cuba, but we're going to be able to we're going to be able to set the pace of like how much China is going to get, and fueling our, Venezuela's been sending oil to all these countries that hate our guts for a long time. So that's going to end. Cuba, I think, is more of a psychological one, where it's just been a thorn in our side, obviously, from the Cold War days. And many, many presidents have tried to remediate the issue down there and have been unsuccessful. And I think President Trump would like to go down as the president that finally took out the communists in Cuba and brought freedom to that island. I know certainly Marco Rubio would like to do that. And since I know all of the most important leaders in Washington listen to your show, I will say that I hope in the negotiations with leaders down there, they coerce Cuba to extradite all the American criminals that have gone down to that island for shelter.
Amen.
That we couldn't get Asada Shakur.
Right.
She died 2 years ago. But there are so many other criminals. There are 2 generations of progressive terrorists that have decamped to that island to escape justice. They need to be sent back.
100%. Let me ask you this question. We have Marco Rubio who get 4 stars for how he's doing things, Scott Bessent. Who is an administration secretary that you feel doesn't get enough attention but is doing just a superb job?
Doug Burgum. Doug Burgum is fantastic. I mean, and he's essential. He's going to be, the Department of Interior is going to be incredibly essential to unlocking Venezuela's oil. And I don't know what's going to happen in Iran, but I'm certain that when if we ever get to a place where our oil companies are going into that country for and this is a very rosy outlook, Department of Interior is going to be all over that because they're in charge of handing out the oil contracts. So he's doing a fantastic job making America energy dominant and giving us an all of the above energy approach. That's not, if we ever have a real kinetic war with some of these people, we're not gonna have gas lines. We're gonna be able to hold our own.
I'll tell you what I find most interesting about the Trump administration is that the people that came in with a lot of hype have all been kind of terrible. The people that you didn't know much about coming in, the quiet ones, the Burgums, the Bessents, they have done a miraculous job.
I'm going to ask you one last question and let you go. We know you're busy. Where do you think America would be in 2028 if we had reelected Kamala Harris?
Well, I mean, at the very least, I'd say we have a very serious inflation problem. We certainly wouldn't have cut taxes the way we did. I mean, Maduro would still be in charge of Venezuela. I'm thinking of all the Trump actions.
Border's still wide open.
Right. I mean, I don't know that we would have been in Iran right now. I will say that.
No.
But I think the jury's still out. We might look at the success of Iran in 6 months and say, my God, if Kamala had been there, we wouldn't have that. So I think that you can take all the achievements of Trump off the board. You can add inflation, and I don't know. I don't think about these dystopic alternative histories. Thankfully it's not here.
Well, that's why you're a resident optimist.
John Levine, thank you so much for joining us once again. We always love having you on the program. Folks, follow him on X at Levine Jonathan. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back on the air next week, but be sure you're tuning in and getting all our content, Substack, Spotify, everywhere you get your content. We're there, and we'll see it on the air.